owning too much or too little of your startup can be a recipe for disaster. Now, you don't want to be that founder who wakes up one day realizing that you're just an employee at your own company. So today we're diving into how much of your company you should be holding on to during each stage of fundraising. And by the end of the video, you're going to know exactly where you stand, whether you've got enough equity to stay motivated or if it's time to share some of the love and ownership with your team. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Let's jump in. All right, let's be real. Whenever it comes to startup equity, balance is everything. You want enough to stay motivated, but not so much that you end up stuck in a corner whenever it's time to scale. And if you don't carve out enough equity for your employees, then they might lose interest faster than a Twitter thread. Everybody wants skin in the game, but how much is too much and how little is too little? Over-dilution is a real thing. And trust me, you don't want to dilute yourself into becoming a bystander in your own company. I've seen it. Founders who've raised so much funding that they practically own the same percentage as the office plans. At that point, you're basically one bad day away from quiet quitting your own business. Investors want you in the game, not watching from the sidelines. Here's the thing, when you own too little of your company, it messes with your head. Instead of staying laser focused, you're gonna start daydreaming about your next startup when you'll own 100%, or worse, you'll scroll through Zillow for the perfect hideaway from your company you no longer feel connected to. It's a slippery slope that can lead to bad decisions, and spoiler alert, everybody can feel it. Your employees, your investors, and even your co-founders. So, how do you protect yourself? Well, it's simple. Keep enough equity to stay motivated and aligned with the long-term vision. Sure, your percentage will go down as you raise more money, but if the valuation keeps climbing, you're gonna get a smaller slice of a much bigger pie. The goal is to own enough that if you sold the company tomorrow, the payout would make you feel like it was all worth it. And everybody's number's different. Some founders are stoked to be with a cool million, others need 10 million or even 100 million to get that same feeling. As for me, I want to sell Forecaster for enough that I will never have to work again. Will I stop working? Probably not. I get bored binge watching Netflix after a week, but I like the idea of having freedom. Some people need that buy a yacht every day for a week kind of money, but that's not me. I just want enough to keep myself and my family financially free. Today, I'm breaking down the ideal equity percentage at different rounds of funding, focusing on 3 key roles: the CEO, the COO, and the CTO. All of today's data is provided through the VCECS Technology Report, so let's go ahead and dive on into it. Let's kick things off by looking at companies that have raised less than $3 million of funding. In these early stage companies, the average CEO owns 36.17% of the business. However, if the CEO is not a founder, that number drops significantly. It goes all the way down to 4.94%. For COOs, founders are going to hold an average of 21.9% of the company, but if that COO is not a founder, then that's also going to drop significantly down to 3.39%. And if you look at CTOs, the founders are going to own roughly 28.1% of the company. If that CTO is not a founder, then they're going to hold about 3.05%. So being a founder versus not being a founder has a drastic effect on your equity. Now let's move on to companies that have raised between $3 million and $10 million of venture funding. At this stage, the average CEO is going to own 23.64% of the company. And if they weren't there from the beginning, that is to say, if they did not found the company, that percentage decreases to 6.66%. COOs who are the founders have an average stake of 13.86% at this stage, and non-founding COOs have a stake of 1.82% on average, and CTOs in founder positions own around 16.7%. For non-founder CTOs, the ownership shrinks to 2.39%. Next, let's look at companies that have raised between 10 million and 25 million. Here, the average CEO is going to own 17.02%, and non-founder CEOs are going to hold 5.82%. Founder COOs typically own around 11.32%, while non-founders in the same role drop to 1.92%, and CTOs who are founders retain about 12.96% of the company. Non-founder CTOs drop down to 1.44%. And lastly, I want to cover companies that have raised a lot of money between $25 and $50 million. Now, for these companies, the average CEO owns about 12.26% of the company. The CEOs who are not founders, the ownership decreases all the way down to 5.38%. Founder COOs will hold about 9.44% of the company. Non-founder COOs drop down to 1.62%. And finally, CTOs who are founders maintain 8.33% equity. Non-founder CTOs own 1.33%. So that's what the data says. And you may have realized that you're in a better position than most, or maybe you found out that maybe you're a little bit behind. And if that's the case, don't worry, there are ways to regain equity in your startup. Like I mentioned earlier, nobody wants an unmotivated executive executive. And if you feel like you're getting the short end of the stick, there's a fix. You can petition your board for more equity. Feel free to use this video as a backup case if that's what you want to do. And if you're far below the average and it's affecting your motivation, the data could support issuing yourself additional options to bring you back to where you need to be. The one thing you don't want to do is keep these feelings to yourself. That's how issues start to build up, leading to quiet quitting. You didn't build this company to hold yourself back over equity concerns. Make sure that you have enough ownership to keep both you and your team motivated for that big exit. So that's the breakdown of how much equity you can expect to hold based off of how much your company has raised. With this info, you're better prepared to assess where you stand and where you might want to make adjustments. And if you're curious about what kinds of financial returns you can see as a startup founder, click the next video and learn more about how much money you can expect to make at different stages.